Let's go to Westwood, a neighborhood in the northern central portion of the West Side region of Los Angeles that is most known for being home to the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. Westwood Village is a shopping and commercial district in Westwood. It was first developed in the 1920s and was for decades a tasteful shopping district serving the then new UCLA campus and nearby affluent neighborhoods like Bel Air and Homely Hills. In the 1960s and 70s, Westwood Village reinvented itself as a regional entertainment center, featuring nightclubs, restaurants, marquee stores, and lots of movie theaters. Considering all an area like Westwood had to offer, it came as a shock to many in the late 1980s, when Westwood began to experience a long commercial decline for many reasons. However, one reason traces back to one specific late evening in early 1988 that would forever change not only the affluent neighborhood, but the entire city of Los Angeles. It was January 30th, 1988, when a young woman by the name of Karen Toshima decided the perfect way to spend her Saturday evening, which also marked a special occasion. Karen is a 27-year-old graphic designer from Long Beach who has just received exciting news of a promotion at her Studio City ad agency job. Karen's boss, Rob Frankel, described her as a bright, playful woman who always tried to keep things in perspective, even when it pertained to life's deeper issues. Frankel recalled a particular conversation where Karen explained how insignificant we all are and joked about how everyday people like herself's deaths wouldn't be noticed. People like us, Karen would remark, are lucky enough to make the small print on the obituary page. Soon enough, Karen's comments would prove to be sadly ironic. Back to that night on January 30th, Karen and her boyfriend Eddie Poon decide that Westwood Village would be the appropriate place to celebrate the promotion news, along with a large crowd of many others who are too out enjoying their Saturday night. After dinner at about 10:45 p.m., Karen and Eddie begin walking along the 1000 block of Broxton Avenue and start window shopping the array of boutiques and shops along the street. Another person who is making their way around Westwood this evening is a 19-year-old Darrell DeWitt Collins. Collins, who had been in and out of trouble since he was an adolescent, is a member of the Rolling 60s, one of the most violent street gangs in South Central Los Angeles at the time. And surprisingly, it is for this reason that Collins has most likely found himself in Westwood. You see, by the late 1980s, Westwood was very different from its once festive and luxurious reputation. For unfounded reasons, the area had become infested with gang activity, spilling from neighboring areas of Los Angeles, including the infamous South Central that was 20 miles away. Although Westwood still attracted throngs of visitors, many could not help but be wary when these gangs began cruising the streets. At the time, current visitors of Westwood made note of the many gang fights, threatened robberies, and gun-toting action that made the once established area a place where a visitor would not even dare to wear certain colors or a gold chain without fear of being killed over it. This particular Saturday night capped a night of fights between gang members of two rival factions of the Crips, one being the Rolling 60s that included Collins, and the other being the Mansfield Hustler Crips. Dressed in a leather trench coat and baseball cap and his hair braided in blue beads, Collins quickly spotted members of the rival gang, and shortly after, a confrontation began in a nearby video arcade that spilled out onto the street. Both gangs were gathered on either side of Broxton Avenue. Pedestrians around, who sensed the escalating confrontation, scrambled to distance themselves from the tense situation. Clerks at Oz, a toy and card store down the block from the scene, later said that a fight among some of the gang members had already broken out minutes earlier in front of the shop, causing panicked passerby to rush into the store. One witness described the scene of the group of youths taunting each other. It was obvious they were separated by an invisible line of some sort, she said. After the scuffle relocated to the street, staff of nearby stores and businesses subsequently scrambled to shut their doors. Their intuitions and actions were smart, considering what would happen next. According to witness statements, at around 10:45 p.m., Mansfield Hustler members were gathered in a parking lot when member Tyrone Swain walked into the street. Swain had been a recent target of an unsuccessful drive-by shooting that he blamed on the Rolling 60s. Now, standing face to face with them, he began taunting his rivals with a milk crate held over his head. That's when Collins, who was on the opposite sidewalk with fellow members of the Rolling 60s, pulled a .38 caliber handgun from his coat pocket and yelled to Swain, "Come on, I've got something for you," and fired twice. Collins had reportedly fired his weapon at Swain. However, Swain was not hit. Still, Collins' bullets had found a target, even though it was not the target intended. Remember that 10:45 p.m. was the approximate time that Karen Toshima was walking along Broxton Avenue with Eddie Poon window shopping. At the exact moment Collins' bullet missed Swain, it instead hit the window shopping Karen, who immediately fell on the sidewalk in front of a parking lot adjacent to a Stratton's Grill restaurant. She had been shot once in the head. Karen laid on the sidewalk as those nearby rushed to her side and called 911. It was a horrific spectacle to those who were unlucky to witness it. The only evidence we have today of the heart-wrenching moment is a photograph thought to have been taken moments after the shooting. A male, perhaps Karen's companion, Eddie Poon, is pictured aiding Karen as she lay in the spot where she had fallen minutes before. As grim as it is in this picture, Karen is not officially dead, as shortly after she was taken to and spent the night on life support at the UCLA Medical Center. When Karen's family arrived at UCLA Medical Center, they were informed that she was brain dead, and the decision was made to pull her off of all life support systems. Karen Toshima was pronounced dead at the age of 27 the following Sunday morning, January 31st, 1988, at approximately 11 a.m. Karen Toshima is buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California, by her father, who joined her side many years later. Karen was wrong when she predicted that her death would not matter. In fact, it was in death that her name for many Angelenos would become synonymous with the era of awakening that the city of Los Angeles was coming into. Karen Toshima's murder on that January night precipitated massive media attention and police scrutiny. 30 detectives were assigned to investigate the homicide, and police patrols in Westwood were tripled. A neighborhood's merchant association offered a $10,000 reward within days of Karen's death, and Zev Yaroslavsky, then a city councilman whose district included Westwood, prodded the council to offer a $25,000 reward for information leading to the killer's arrest. Meanwhile, Collins was among dozens of bystanders rounded up the night of Karen's death, questioned by the police, then ultimately released. However, Collins' picture was taken along with several other suspected gang members and shown to eyewitnesses. It was their identification of him that led to his arrest a week later at the Southwest Los Angeles home he shared with his father. The case of Collins hinged on the testimony of the eyewitnesses because there was little physical evidence linking Collins to the killing. Even though the gun suspected to be used by Collins was recovered 2 days later, hidden in an ivy bed near UCLA, no fingerprints were found on it. However, remember, the Saturday night Karen was killed, Westwood was filled with an array of people who witnessed a confrontation that would ultimately lead to her death. It was 4 eyewitnesses that testified that they saw Collins pull the trigger, all from different vantage points along Broxton Avenue. Jury foreman Penny L. Larson noted that all the eyewitnesses had good vantage points to view the shooting of Karen Toshima. For the defense to have had a case, Larson said, everyone on the prosecution would have had to have lied. Darrell DeWitt Collins was convicted of 1 count each of first-degree murder and first-degree attempted murder. Deputy District Attorney Michael J. Duarte urged the judge to sentence Collins to consecutive life terms. The prosecutor was supported in his recommendation by a letter written to the court by Karen's younger brother, Kevin. Although my sister was not the intended victim, it was nevertheless a killing, which was pre-intended, and my sister and family, as a result, have suffered because of Collins' premeditated action, Kevin Toshima wrote. Collins was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison where he remains today. The conviction was particularly hard for Collins' family, who adamantly denied his involvement with gangs and held him as a promising young man with a bright future. However, this is a true crime story that would not end with the victim receiving justice. For Los Angeles, the Westwood shooting was only the beginning of a conversation many said was years overdue. In response to the public outcry, police beefed up their presence in Westwood and began a series of massive and periodic sweeps of gang members in primarily poor sections of the city. However, many could not help but wonder if there was a disparity between racial and class brackets of Los Angeles in a critical time where Black and Hispanic leaders charged that police were not responding equally to murders in South and East Los Angeles. You see, a record 257 people were slain in gang-related violence in Los Angeles in 1988. Many civil rights advocates suggested that Karen Toshima's slaying only sparked a public outcry among residents of the predominantly white area of Westwood, who had previously felt immune from the gang violence that plagued poor minority neighborhoods in South and East Los Angeles. Although she was Japanese American, Karen Toshima was like a surrogate for white Angelenos who were shocked to see that such violence had found its way to the West Side. Now, Karen Toshima's death, to many, was finally putting the dirty laundry that was Los Angeles' gang problem out in the open for everyone to see. Advocates, while deploring Karen Toshima's killing, said no such concerted police and media attention ever attended the numerous killings of innocent Blacks by gangs in the predominantly Black South Central part of Los Angeles. Often cited at this time was one case in which a 9-year-old Black boy by the name of DeAndre Brown, who was shot while playing on a swing in a playground in a random drive-by gang initiation killing, just the year before in 1987. The Black community has known for years that a problem is not a problem until it hits the white community, said then Assemblywoman Maxine Waters. There is a deep feeling in the Black community that the philosophy of the police department was, let them kill each other in South Central LA. Waters' words hold merit in their own right. However, certain statistics at the time created a dichotomy in people's judgment. The Black gangs have progressively gotten more violent and affluent, said Steve Valdivia, Executive Director of Youth Gang Services. Also, the relative value of life has decreased. They don't give a damn about their own lives or anyone else's. Here points to a dilemma. In the case of poor areas like South Central, victims of gun violence were more than likely the same color as their aggressors, causing others to lump victims and aggressors together, most likely casting it aside as another case of Black-on-Black crime. This makes the interracial aspect of Karen Toshima's case exceptional. To many, it was the confirmation that the victim not being Black was a prerequisite for a case not being thrown to the wayside. According to many, this mindset was even infiltrating the media. In the years before the Toshima killing and subsequent racial divisions, many local newspapers and television stations were accused of not being as sensitive to violence in poor neighborhoods as they were in rich ones. At the time, even the news media, for lack of a better word, was jaded when it came to murders. Murders that involved Black and brown victims in poor areas of Los Angeles were considered run-of-the-mill, resulting in little news traction with stories that involved victims that failed to fit in the accepted image. Now, with the news of the Westwood shooting, the media along with law enforcement was taking on a different tone. A week and a half after the shooting, a so-called gang summit was held where law enforcement officials from across the country met to devise a strategy for battling street gangs. It was at this summit where they dubbed 1988 the year of the gang. Later that year, the city of Los Angeles hired 650 police officers and devoted more than $5 million of emergency funds to battle gangs. During the summer, then Police Chief Daryl F. Gates launched a controversial task force called Operation Hammer that was assigned to sweep through the neighborhoods and target gang members and drug dealers for interrogation and arrest. However, these solutions in the form of raids were not without their own controversies. On August 1st, 1988, scores of Los Angeles police officers descended on 2 apartment buildings on the corner of 39th Street and Dalton Avenue in Southwest Los Angeles. It was an all-out search for drugs and a massive show of force designed to deliver a strong message to the most violent and detrimental gangs. However, instead the raid went far beyond its purpose and instead became a parade of reckless abuse by the LAPD. So much so that the city of Los Angeles was forced to pay more than 50 residents, property owners, and those rounded up in the raid a record of nearly $4 million in damages in an out-of-court settlement. Ultimately, Operation Hammer was declared a failure and an embarrassment to law officials who agreed that it created a setback in the pursuit of street gangs. The shooting of Karen Toshima would accelerate what everyone agreed on was a much-needed aggression on violent street gangs. However, such aggression became intertwined with the already rising cases of police brutality and accusations of police corruption within the LAPD, a problem that on its own was challenging the social and political climate of Los Angeles and would explode in the coming years. In the years following Karen Toshima's death, Westwood, a once thriving Los Angeles hotspot, dwindled in popularity. The decline in the village's attractiveness has often been attributed to the shooting, but it took more than a bullet to change the village that had prospered for decades into a forgotten neighborhood. A myriad of issues affected Westwood in the 1980s, including the development of competing communities, higher rents, less suitable merchants, and a lack of parking. Still, many experts agreed that the Toshima shooting was a key acceleration in the decline of Westwood. The area, which was already facing competition from Old Pasadena, The Grove, and Universal City Walk, was simply not in a position to take on the amount of negative press that resulted from the shooting. With that one fatal round, Westwood Village's fall began. Although modern times have seen some improvements, the once reputable area was truly never the same after that terrible January night in 1988. The Westwood shooting of 1988 that resulted in the tragic death of Karen Toshima only was the prequel to the phase that Los Angeles was entering, especially at the turn of the decade into the 1990s. The shooting of Karen Toshima was one of the first events that forced Los Angeles as a whole to start the conversation that would only become more relevant with the difficult era that the city was soon going to enter. By 1992, the annual pace of gang-related murders would climb nearly 80%. Just like Karen Toshima, many as half of the victims would be innocent bystanders. Karen Toshima's murder was the first of a series of many incidents, including the murder of LaTosha Harlins, the Rodney King beating, the Los Angeles riots, and even the O.J. Simpson trials. All of these incidents weakened the city's fragile psyche and made residents feel more vulnerable and uncertain about the future than ever. For the city of Los Angeles, the case of racial and class disparity as it pertained to violence and the law and order that responded to it had only merely begun its opening statements in the court of public perception and analysis. One of the best statements to summarize the fatal shooting of Karen Toshima, ironically, comes from her killer's defense attorney, Paul Takajian, in a Los Angeles Times article released on the 10th anniversary of the tragic event. "Unfortunately, I don't feel her death changed anything," said Takajian. "It was merely a signpost of the unhappy road ahead, a road that has led to other tragic shootings, which come to prominence for a day or two before being relegated to the long and tragic line in innocent victim cases. She's just part of the body count."